Heidi ho, neighbor.
Alrighty, hello, hello. How are you? Happy Halloween to everybody.
It is a good day indeed. Nothing wrong with the day where you can get free candy.
Yeah, not too shabby.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll give it a second or two before we kick off. But we got something pretty cool we're going to show today. We're going to talk through a new threat we built for the Scythe platform. And we got a little creative with this one and wanted to introduce some different aspects to the attack path for it. So we've got a physical piece to show as well. But plus, I just wanted an excuse to play with some of my toys, so it was a good reason to do it. But yeah, we'll show that off today.
No sense in having it if you're not going to use them.
Exactly. So let's kick this thing off. Tyler, who are we talking about today?
Alrighty. Today the threat is. Oh, sorry about that. Scrolled down on me there. Today the threat is Earth Preta, which is also known as Mustang Panda or Stately Taurus. So this was a threat that, or an adversary threat group that we've been seeing pop up a lot in CTI. It's mostly focused on education, research, business over in Japan, Australia, and the Pacific region. It's got some pretty neat novel behaviors like curl over FTP, some different persistence mechanisms that we're going to get into, exfiltration, things like that. But one of the really cool parts that Trey had already alluded to is we've seen the initial execution of them utilizing a Ducky script, using like a FlipperZero to go in and emulate a keyboard, and then essentially it'll type out the commands that you have it preloaded to type, and then execute it in that way, which I think Trey is going to get more into.
Yep. So it was really interesting to see that this threat was utilizing removable drives and other routes to move payloads and things like that back and forth. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I've got this really cool toy sitting on my desk that I don't get to play with too much. Let's see what I can do with it. Broke it out. Notice it has the BADUSB functionality, which works great with Ducky scripts. So it has a ton of different uses for it. But in this instance, I was like, okay, let's see how we can take a Scythe payload and emulate a full campaign from the initial access of a physical medium all the way through the kill chain. And it's worked out pretty well. So we took an example like the Ducky script you see here on the screen. It's made to be very visible. It's going to pop a shell window, so whoever's at the desk will see it happen at the time. But you can easily hide these and make it a lot more stealthy. But it pops the shell window, enters some commands, does a download string, and then executes the payload from the Ducky script. And then if everything works out well, it should kick off a Scythe campaign from the victim host back to your C2 server. So let's show that off real quick. Tyler, you want to throw it up there?
Yeah.
We're playing around with a second camera today too, so we'll see how this works out. So first thing we need, obviously, is handy dandy flipper, right? So got it. Let's say I wandered up to this guy's desk. The poor guy doesn't know how bad of a day he's about to have with security, but I'll take my flipper real quick. I'll plug her in and hit run. And of course, the screen went black for a second. As I hit run, we'll see magic starts happening on the keyboard. And again, like I said, we made this very visible on purpose, so it's not very stealthy or hidden. But it's a good way to show how physical access can be a huge detractor to what you're trying to do. And it was as simple as that. It did a quick type, downloaded the payload, and executed the process. The cool thing about the flippers and BADUSB in general is it's actually, like Tyler had said, emulating a human interface device, so keyboards, mice, things like that. And you can set it up to do that so that when this is happening, it actually looks like someone's typing on keyboard, entering keystrokes. It's not an automated process or something else doing a thing. So it's a cool little feature, I guess you could say. It's interesting. It's a novel concept to introduce payloads and things like that in this manner.
Yeah, for sure. And like Trey said, so the commands it runs are set here in the string. So that PowerShell command that we had in there, Trey already had that pre-staged on there, so all you have to do is plug it in, then it executes exactly what you have stored in here. It'll press enter. You can have a delay in there, comments, notes, things like that. And then on our Scythe platform, we can actually see that we have a check. These were from our other testings earlier, but we can see that we have an active check-in from Trey's desktop that he deployed it on. which is pretty sweet. So we'll get more into what the campaign is doing, and we'll let that execute kind of in the background. So then moving down, so we have our initial access, again, which is through the Ducky script, and then once it executes, it will perform some registry modifications, both for persistence and for some defense evasion. So it pulls down this USB config.exe, which is our first persistence mechanism we have in the threat. This one is just an emulated persistence. We just wanted to put an additional file in the run key to see if you have detections for files or executables that are put in the run key, which will start or which will execute upon startup. And then we also get into the registry keys for the defense evasion I was talking about. So it'll change the values. Sorry about that. I don't know why. I think it's because I'm so zoomed in. It'll change the registry values for the show super hidden, and hide file extension. So what that's going to do is disable, it will disable being able to view these files or file extensions from inside of File Explorer, which is useful in this instance because the persistence mechanism, the USB config.exe, if you see right before it, it's preceded by some backslashes, underscore backslash. So that's going to put it in a hidden directory. So by changing these registry values, they won't be able to see that. Even if they previously had it set to view hidden files, it would now make them blind to this if they're just going through Explorer.
Yeah, it's a super simple method, but like at first glance, somebody looking around on the host might overlook that or not see it. So it's it's an interesting thing to see.
Yeah, so if you're not looking at it, through some kind of defensive tooling or seam or something like that, or even like command prompt where you're listing all even hidden things, if you're just going through Explorer like most people, you're not going to see it. 1 second. Sorry about that. And then next part, we get into some discovery. All this is pretty typical discovery actions. The one that's kind of a little more novel is it's querying Security Center to try to pull your antivirus directly. So instead of trying to list out like common processes or things like that, or look for what security tooling you have from like from a list, like essentially checking if it's there from a list. It's just querying this namespace directly to try to pull your antivirus, which is a little different. It's also reaching out to myip.ipip.net, which is kind of twofold. One, to see if you have access to the internet from the machine that you're on, as well as ascertain what your public IP address is. And then one more that I think is really neat and interesting and a lot of fun to do is the NetSHWLAN show profile and show interface. So that'll give you details about your wireless networks and different wireless profiles that you've connected to. You can actually modify after you do the show profiles. You can put in the name of the profile and put key equals clear, and it will actually give you the password to that Wi-Fi in clear text in your terminal. You don't have to be an admin; you can just be a regular user who runs that. It's like almost like a little party trick. I like to do that a lot. But yeah, just some typical discovery actions. Nothing too crazy. Definitely the ones to point out are that security center trying to curl the IP net, and then this trace RT out to Google, which again is just confirming that you have internet connectivity. And we get into the actual persistence mechanism. So this also will affect the run key. We're modifying the run key to we're modifying the run key to launch this WC browser watcher.exe upon startup. I know we do it two different ways. Sorry, I was getting confused with the two pictures. So we put it in two different places. One is in the run key, and another one is via a scheduled task that we run. So we have it in two places in case you see it in the run key. We still have it as a scheduled task. So if you catch it in one spot, maybe you'll stop looking and won't see it in the other. And the scheduled task is scheduled to run upon startup as well.
Now, this is something some people might ask the question here, Tyler. What is Cocoa Browser? Why does that matter here?
Cocoa Browser is a very commonly used browser over in the Pacific. So we know that the threat actor targets businesses, education, things like that in the Pacific realm. So they have named their malware, their persistence, to kind of go along with the Cocoa browser in there. So this more than likely, if they are attacking someone in the Pacific, they will more than likely already have this installed, so they don't have to install any additional software. It's inside of Cocoa browser, which if you guys have looked at logs, things like Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Cocoa browser, I'm sure has a lot of EXEs in there, and it's pretty typical to make network connections. So it's not going to look overly suspicious if that's something that you use all the time, right? Yeah, that was a good point. We had to Google that. I was like, I'm not sure what this Cocoa browser is. I was like, should we install this? It's like, no, it should already be installed on the endpoint. And then next we get into some collection. Collection is normally just a precursor to exfiltration, which we're going to do as well. So to do that, we don't want to collect any of your actual files. So we'll go in, we'll use the file module to create some dummy files, some docs and PDFs inside this directory that we created. So that way we're not archiving any of your actual data or sending your actual data anywhere.
Ooh, my bad.
Oh, you're good.
I didn't mean to kick you off there.
It's no problem. Going to that, this is just us staging the collection in there. So we have two different archival methods that we use in this threat. So one is WinRAR, which is what the adversary has been seen to utilize in their campaigns, as well as 7-zip. So we have both of them in there because WinRAR doesn't have an official supported portable version of it. You have to do the full install, and we don't want to install software that people don't want installed on their machines. So we have just a variable set to yes or no. If you don't want it installed, no. If you do want it installed, yes. And then if you choose no, it'll just skip over this and do it the 7-zip way. But they both run the same way. It goes in, it will pull down the installer or the portable 7-zip from the virtual file system. It'll start that process to install it, and then it's going to gather any .docs, .docx, XLS, PDFs, things like that are all inside of that collection folder. And it's going to tar it up, save it as a RAR file inside of this program data IDM, which again is something that we've seen the adversary use. So it's the same directory that they utilize to store everything in.
And it's pretty standard procedures. It's the same stuff you see everybody looking for, same juicy loot that people want to find. So it's nothing out of the norm here, really.
Yeah, so they want the juicy files. When they actually run it, they run it across your entire file system in shared drives, not just one file. So they have it set to only look for things that they think are going to be interesting, like documents, PowerPoints, PDFs, things like that. They also employ where they only look back for the last 30 days, so to only try to get the most up-to-date or probably relevant information from the machines as well. So once it does that, has it archived, they have all the files that they want. We have two curl commands here that they utilize curl to exfiltrate this data over FTP. So a little different than typical, sending it to a file share or to Dropbox or file.io, things like that. So utilizing the FTP protocol to send it outwards. And we have two of them here. One of them with this -C and -T is pulled exactly verbatim from the CTI. So this is the command that they have been seen to utilize on networks. But when you run this command, it doesn't work. The -C is not a valid command. The -T doesn't work. So we think that is indicative of an adversary going interactive on a machine. So instead of them having like a click script almost of all the different commands they're going to run, or having an automated system run all of their commands, them having spelling errors or flag errors or things like that is indicative that they have some kind of open shell interactive that they're communicating back and forth with, and it's not just an automated campaign or procedure that's being run. So that's why we include both of them in there.
Yeah, it's likely something might have messed up for them, or there was something that was high fidelity here that they were really needed, so they weren't leaving it to chance to automation or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's how we archive and exfiltrate using WinRAR. And then again, we have 7-zip on there as well if you don't want WinRAR to be installed. That just pulls down the portable 7-zip, archives everything, and sends it out the same way over DLP. You can see here that the archive is created, and then here that it was successfully sent out to dlptest.com, which they host in a FTP file server, storage server, FTP server, so you can test DLP or your DLP mechanisms on your endpoints. So we utilize that in this test.
And
And
you can
then,
obviously change that to whatever you want it to be. If you've got a redirector hosted out in the wild somewhere or something like that, you could easily switch it and push your data that way.
yeah, for
We
sure.
used this one just because it was a fairly well-known and considered safe point.
Yes, for sure. There are not as many FTP file hosting sites out there as there are HTTPS file hosting sites, so it can be a little difficult if you're not going to stand one up on your own. And then the last part that we get into in the threat prior to the cleanup steps that we're going to run is a DLL C2 check-in. So we created this DLL, netutils.dll, which is just going to reach out to some known Earth Preta C2. In this instance, it's the aihkstore.com. So you should just see some network connections coming from a DLL inside of the temp directory. So that should trigger some kind of investigation or alert, we would hope.
And this is something that we typically do with like our standard IOCs as well. So it's not actually like requesting any data from the site or anything. It's just trying to generate that net flow and that log for you showing the connection happened. And
Mhm.
in reality, if your defensive tooling is keeping up, the odds of this domain already being blacklisted are pretty high.
Yeah, so yeah, ideally all, like you were saying, ideally all of the C2 domains and things like that that we have in our threats should ideally already be blocked by your end devices, because they're not new. You know, your security tooling should be getting updates faster than we are manually going into the CTI and pulling the C2 infrastructure out. So ideally it will already be blocked, but if not, it's another great test to see how up to date you are on common C2.
It's that low hanging fruit on the pyramid of pain there.
Mhm.
It's stuff we shouldn't have to think about, but sadly sometimes you gotta.
Yeah, well, and two, it's the simple things still work, which is why they still use them. If the C2 doesn't get burned, they're just going to keep using it. So you should definitely test and see if you're allowing traffic out to these sites.
Well,
So
cool. So that was the threat. Let's talk through detections real quick, Tyler, and then I want to hop back and show them the Ducky script one more time, just for those that have never seen them before.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, got a little bit of the sickness going on here. Yeah, so I'll quickly just go through some of the detections that we have. So the first one is a suspicious curl DNS query. This should be saying curl.exe over here, but it has it as an unknown process, which I think you should also be concerned with if you're seeing an unknown process or an unknown image creating a DNS request. That should be something that should be investigated, right? But we can see here that these are our images that are performing the DNS request. We see it going out to our local host here, as well as that FTP site, that IP info, Google, and then training stage, which is our Scythe C2 instance that we have currently. Sorry, I thought I had to sneeze. I'm going through it over
It's trying
here,
to trick
everybody.
you.
I'm going through it over here. The next part we have is just that archive creation. So for this, we're looking for images of 7-zip or PowerShell compressed archive, just some typical archive creation methods. In our thread, I turned off the WinRAR installations. That's why we're only seeing the 7-zip. I don't know if you guys have ever installed WinRAR, but it can be very difficult to get it all the way out of your system and revert everything. So I don't like to install it if I don't have to. Then the next part is just some suspicious low bass discovery commands. So just some typical, living off the land binaries that we see utilized a lot. So net, netstat, arp, ipconfig, task list, that netsh, things like that. So just a common listing that we have of all of the low bass commands that someone could run or that we see very often. The next is my favorite. I think we talk about this every time we do this. I hit it all the time, is the suspicious CMD or PowerShell parent image locations, which I actually need to update this to include the Windows terminal. That was a new to me thing that we had just discovered the other day doing a purple team exercise. But this essentially looks for if PowerShell is being called or executed, if it's the child process of any image that is not in program files, System32 or program files x86, I want to know about it. right? So in this instance, we download all of our campaigns to just the user profile campaigns. We have an exclusion in there so it doesn't get deleted. But if it's running out of temp, if it's running out of downloads, public, user profile, anywhere that is abnormal, which to me abnormal is not System32 and not program files, right? Because that should be things that are either installed by Windows or installed by you, and you know about them on your system. So yeah, I love this detection. It works for almost all of our threats, and it really gives you just a great snippet screenshot of what is happening on your environment.
It is kind of an early game cheat code. It's not fair
Yes,
at times.
yeah, if you're not running, and we just run Sysmon in our lab, we don't have an EDR that's running in there that we're getting the logs back from. So unless you're running something in memory, which we do in some of our threats as well, if you're utilizing a shell or CMD or PowerShell to run something, it'll pop up here. And it's just a great win, low hanging fruit. And then the next two are similar with the scheduled task creation. The first one is if it sees any kind of scheduled, like new scheduled task or edit scheduled task, register scheduled task, things like that, those commandlets inside of the command line arguments itself, or like scheduled task / add if you're doing it through command prompt and not PowerShell. So it will detect it there. Excuse me. It will detect it in the command line that way. But if you're running again in memory, or if you're running in memory, or you're doing another way to register a scheduled task, it won't show up in here. But where it will show up is inside of this C Windows System32 tasks. Every scheduled task that's created has a file created in this directory, which should be created by SVC host. If it's not created by SVC host, that's a problem. That is something that somebody did to manipulate that task creation. But inside of System32 tasks, it gets a file with information about that scheduled task. So even if they run it in memory, or they utilize another program to make it, or they do it in some other kind of way where you don't have visibility over the command line, you will have visibility over this folder, because it has to create a file there to make the scheduled task. That hits on another thing that we always talk about not having simple detections that just look at the command line actions, but having detections that will be there no matter what, because no matter how they create the scheduled task or the process, it has to write this file here. So yeah, I like that one a lot. I would definitely recommend monitoring that directory for anything new that's placed there, and definitely anything that's placed there not by SVC host. Then the last one is just the registry modifications. This is just looking for file changes inside of this run key inside of this hive, which again has the two different persistence mechanisms we place there, AON Swift and the USB config. And
I think these last two are pretty interesting, especially based off the naming. Things like a changed registry key or value, that kind of stuff, I think tends to update fairly regularly as organizations update the way their group policy works, the security settings, things they're doing. But scheduled tasks, something like this, especially something very generically named like Microsoft Xbox U, where it's trying to blend in and look like an app or something that's already there. Your native OS isn't adding new tasks like that fairly often, at least as far as I've seen, and I think as far as we've seen in really anything we've been doing or detecting. So that kind of should stick out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, once you have like your gold image, there's not people aren't nothing is really creating additional scheduled tasks or anything like that, or really even modifying the run keys. It's unless you install some new software, or you have some tasks set up to perform some action for you, which most users will never do. It's pretty uncommon that you'll see an update to that and not be able to quickly determine if it's supposed to be there or not, frankly. And then
Yeah.
see real quick before we switch to the Ducky script again, Trey. I see that Vic has a question on where can we find the list that we're looking at. Are you talking about for the LOLBAS commands? I'm gonna assume that you are, unless I see something. So you can get a list from that if you just go to the LOLBAS project. They have a list here of the LOLBAS commands and how they're utilized, what you can do with them. Look for net.
Oh, he means the your dashboard. So this was something that he does for all of our detections. We do a dashboard just to show it as a proof of concept. But for those that are Scythe customers, we provide all of the detection logic that's been created as well and package that with all of the threats.
Yeah, and then all of these are Sigma rules that we create and then translate. So if you are interested in some detections, I would recommend checking out Sigma HQ. They have all of their published Sigma rules, kind of like the community where most people add their Sigma rules to for detections and things like that.
Or if you
But
want, if you're more curious about the stuff that we're directly creating or some of the stuff Tyler's been showing off, if you go to the URL down here in the ticker in the bottom, we host workshops typically monthly. Our next one coming up, I believe, is on the 13th, and that'll be hunting through the scene. So the man, the myth, the legend right here, Tyler, will actually be walking you through doing these actions and doing some detection engineering and getting visibility and doing cool stuff with Splunk. So if that interests you, I would definitely register and check it out. It's a free workshop, so nothing wrong with that. And you get CPEs at the end.
only a couple hours. All right, Trey. I'll drop this, and then you can go ahead and show some of your Ducky script stuff that you are.
Can do. Yeah, I just wanted to show this one more time because we kind of went over it quickly, trying to show the cooler piece. But if you've never played with the USB rubber ducky or BADUSB or anything like that in general, it uses what they call ducky scripts, and this format is set up to allow you to emulate keystrokes and things like that and inject them onto host. I wanted to do a real kind of quick walkthrough here. Anywhere you see rem in this ducky script, if you decide to try to use it for yourself, is just a comment in place to let you know what's going on and then the following steps. Something like GUI TAC R and ducky script language is just saying press the GUI key. In this instance, it's Windows key. If it was for Mac or Linux, it would be some other key or the Apple key, things like that. We follow that up with a delay. That delay is just saying wait 500. Now this number is not in seconds, it's in milliseconds. If this was in seconds, we'd be here all day watching that window go. But from there, we tell it to insert a string in that new window. And basically what's happening here, Windows key R opens, run, delays for a second to make sure it opens depending on how fast or slow or bloated your host happens to be. Types in CMD, then hits enter. It's going to open up command prompt. Has a little bit of a longer delay to allow command prompt to load up. From there, it's going to enter this string of PowerShell -command and go and download the payload that we have. What's interesting about this one is for current Scythe users, especially if you're on SaaS instance or anything, we've put out a new capability with VFS to where you can host files in your public directory and treat it as a think of it as a redirector or a jump point, things like that. So you can host a payload or a text file or something there, and then reach back to it and grab it from a victim host. So you're not having to try to directly say pass the data all the time through C2. Maybe you want it to come from some other point or anything like that. You have that ability now to host them inside an implant, if that makes sense. We're going into the outside to do new cool things. But from there, it's going to write it down as an executable and then start process calling said executable that we just downloaded. And then enter is just saying press the enter key again. And if everything goes well, that'll kick off the payload for you, and you'll get a cool callback to Scythe in an interesting and new way. Yeah, that was really it there, Tyler. I just wanted to talk through it 1 second because I know this could be a new thing to people, and I'll let them get a second to look at it. It's nothing fancy. It's nothing really high speed or anything like that. It's very clear on purpose. You can make these a lot more stealthy. There's some really cool examples of ducky scripts out there that do some awesome stuff. But for the sake of the threat and what we're trying to do here, and we're in kind of this more purple team space, right, where we're wanting to be transparent and visible and collaborate. We wanted to make sure you guys could see it and that who you're working with could see it.
Yeah, and with that too, you definitely like in speaking of purple teaming, it's fine to start, in the clear and see what you can see. You would be surprised at what your visibility is if you've never tested it. Like it's good to start in the clear, in the open, simple commands, and then get a little more, in memory execution or a little more evasive, kind of as you already have a baseline. You don't want to start being super sneaky.
Well, all right. I think that about wraps it up for today. What about you, good sir? Any last parting words? Anything like that?
No, that's it for me. Thanks everybody for hopping on, and hopefully see you again in the future.
Yep. Have fun. Happy Halloween. Go get lots of candy and stay spooky.